Are President Biden's allies in the media starting to turn on him? Take a look at this brutal cover from the Economist magazine. It mocks President Biden with an image of a walker and the presidential seal mounted on it. The headline, "No way to run a country." The paper's editor-in-chief adding more insult to injury.
I watched the debate like millions of Americans and was shocked to see a befuddled old man struggling to recall words and facts. Unfortunately, and this is brutally true, the passage of time goes one way. And the impact on mental acuity really only goes one way. And I think that's the reason that we wrote what we did, which was pretty tough, I admit. And that's because this is the toughest job in the world. And you can't run a presidency on auto cue.
Even Joe Biden's fiercest media ally, Joe Scarborough, is sounding skeptical of the president staying in the race.
It is July the 5th. This happened 8 days ago, and decision time is not upon us yet. And though it may be coming soon, Republicans long idolized an aging Republican president whose decline was so bad it led an incoming chief of staff, Howard Baker, to commission a study of the 25th Amendment in case they needed to use it on Ronald Reagan. So please, Republicans, please, right-wing media outlets, spare us your moral indignation over a man who had a really, really terrible debate, but a man who's been the most effective president over the past 3.5 years.
Okay, Tyrus.
I'm sorry. Listen, as a man who's been in Dutch with the wife a few times, that was a typical, he got sent home for a couple of days for acting out.
I was going to ask you, does Mika have a right to have Joe sleep on the couch? Because, I mean, right after the debate, he had a knee-jerk reaction like many of my fellow Democrats did, and now he seems to be dialing it back.
It wasn't a knee-jerk reaction. The one with the problem is the wife in this one, because this should be the reaction of every Democrat. Let's just take them. Let's just put it on me. Let's put it on, since I like the orange guy. Let's say I just found out that all the orange guy's policies and everything that he said was being done by Omarosa. I would not be a happy Republican. I'd be like, this person's been running the country, and these are the things that have been going on, and this and all this drama and cocaine in my White House and people having sex in the Capitol and all this stuff going on, and we don't know when the guy who runs the Pentagon's out sick. Like, this has been going on for, I would be furious as a voter. I'd be like, you know what? I'm not voting for you or anybody who's representing me because you misled me. So that's what my issue is, all this. These aren't backstabbing. These aren't jerks. These are buyer's remorse and going, hey, I invested in you and you love the country so much and you're going to save us from a dictator. A dictator doesn't leave when he can't do his job anymore. He stays till he dies. So if Biden cared about the Democratic Party when he started slipping, and we saw it a year and a half ago, it started getting worse, they should have been. This should have been him giving a grand speech about, I'm going to finish out my term as president and I can't do it anymore. And you know how much people would have got behind Kamala or whomever they picked? But because you chose to go lie and run and underneath them run progressive stuff that nobody voted for, not you or anyone else in the American people. So they're not the bad guys. These are the good guys who are finally stepping out. Some of them were in on it and they're bailing because they have buyer's remorse.
Yeah, Lisa, I want to ask you, do you get your news from the editor-in-chief at The Economist? I know I don't. I think we're going to agree on that.
I don't, but the American people should be furious at the media. I mean, you want to look at where we are in American history right now. We have a president who cannot operate outside of the hours 10 to 4 p.m. How is this not the biggest scandal in American history right now? And the media covered it up. Not only did they cover it up, but they condemned, they attacked those of us who told this truth. They called it cheap fakes. This is the biggest cheap fake in American history, what we're seeing with the media. The media is the biggest threat to democracy. Look, the American people expect to be lied to by politicians. You expect for a White House press secretary to go out there and to spin you, to get half-truths. But the media are supposed to tell us the truth. They're supposed to be the fourth estate. They're supposed to be the ones holding them accountable. And ever since Donald Trump walked down that golden escalator, all they have told is lies. You go from the Russia collusion, the Hunter Biden laptop story. They lied about what Trump said about Charlottesville. You look at these cheap fakes video. That was a lie. It's lie after lie. So that is a scandal. They are the biggest threat to democracy.
Joey, two things. She talks about lies. If it's bad that the Biden, allegedly President Biden, his administration, his White House is lying, is it bad that Donald Trump, who is a former president and running for president, is lying? 1 and 2, why is it bad if Joe Biden decides to go to bed at 8 p.m., but George W. Bush, who was under 60 years of age, went to bed at 9 p.m.?
I'll take the first one first. Okay, take lies out of it. I mean, we'll take lies all out of it and tell me, is it worse to speak in hyperbole, or is it worse to be so apparently out of it that you can't remember the fact to begin with? Donald Trump will say something like, I'm going to get all those troops out of Afghanistan. And then he'll come back and say, the plan is we're going to keep 2,500 there until the Taliban does this or that. Joe Biden says something like, my son died in Iraq. You know what veterans sitting at home feel when he says something like that? And now he's amended it to his son died because of Iraq. Let me tell you, I lost my legs in Afghanistan. If I fall down out there and get taken out by a Prius, I didn't die because of Afghanistan. There's a certain honor that comes for that, and only certain men and women get it. But he'll stand up there and use every tragedy his family has ever suffered to score some sort of political cheap point. Is that a lie? I'll let the voters decide if it's a lie, but it's absolutely demented as a political tactic, and half the time I don't know that he doesn't actually believe it. So when Donald Trump gets up there and says something that's hyperbolic, there are times when I cringe and there are times when I think it's funny. There are very few times that I think he's doing it because he thinks he's going to convince 100 million Americans that that is a fact. And I think that style of Donald Trump compared to what we're seeing in Joe Biden is very obviously different to the independent voters in those 5 swing states, one of which being Michigan, where people are swinging towards Donald Trump.
I'm going to get the doctor. Doctor, I am somebody who believes that both candidates, and I think, honestly, anybody running for president should be, put through testing and cognitive testing, but not some of the cognitive tests that are out there that I've tried myself and I thought were pretty simplistic.
Well, we've seen publicly President Biden has taken 2 cognitive tests, and he has submitted those results for the American people in addition to his annual physical exam. Anybody over the age of 65 really should be having annual cognitive tests. Joe Biden, on the other hand, has not done that. And even on his annual health updates, they do not even mention his cognition. So I do think that it would behoove him to do that. The interview tonight, you heard Brian Salter say it'll be, it's a live doctor's interview to see what his cognition is. No, it's not. It's a daytime taped interview. It is absolutely not that. But should he, at this point, have a cognitive exam? Yes, not because he's necessarily the president, just because he should. Anyone at his age should, especially if he is expected to have executive function. He is the executive of the United States of America. He absolutely should. And it is very disheartening that he has not been completely honest. To echo what Lisa said, I don't think it's the biggest scandal that, his decline has been, that's not the biggest scandal. It's the media's cover-up of his decline over the last several years. In my opinion, that's the biggest scandal.
But you said over 65. So would that be fair then that any candidate over 65, Democrat or Republican, these 2 candidates,
I've been calling for that. Medicare recommends cognitive evaluations at your annual exams. That's why it's covered by Medicare. They should be getting it, and President Biden, unfortunately, has not been having it. Now, even if he had it, are they going to disclose that to the United States when they still want him to be there? And, it sounds like other people may be making decisions for him. They may not.
I certainly hope.
We're going to have to talk about this during the break.
Absolutely. Ahead on the 5. Did Vice President Kamala Harris participate in a cover-up? Why her replacement talk could be doomed.
Click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You won't get it anywhere else.